Good morning and welcome to this KRUX podcast. The idea of the podcast is you'll remember that whenever there's anyone that can't attend our Thursday night sessions that we host in the KRUX lounge at Stellenbosch, then we interview the speaker or the author of the topic after the session, and then it's a catch-up session for anybody that couldn't be there. So in the last KRUX Thursday at KRUX, I did a presentation on a research project that a student and I conducted, in which we were looking at a game theoretical analysis of the Sermon on the Mount. And because Esranel couldn't be there, I thought it would be good to have the podcast and host her and interview her about her experience on the research a little bit. So I would like to introduce to the KRUX community, this is Esranel Becker. And she is from Namibia, and she was enrolled for her BCom Honours degree in operations research at the Department of Logistics at Stellenbosch University. And she's since graduated and she's ready to start her career. And her research interests are on finding innovative ways to quantify complex qualitative concepts and to transform these for mathematical modeling and optimization, which she then applied to a theological concept. So, Esranel, welcome to the KRUX podcast. I'll begin by asking you, if you had to explain to somebody that missed the presentation, what is your project about? And how can you simply explain it to somebody that maybe doesn't have a strong mathematical background?
Okay, so my honours research project was about attempting to quantify the tenets in the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 5 from the New Testament in the Bible. So the Sermon on the Mount, which was given by Jesus, was seen as strategies in the game of life according to these Christian tenets. And these strategies in the Gospel of Matthew may not always appear to us to be a winning approach in the game of life. In fact, they are very, very contradictory to what we intuitively view as victory. Because we have our own selfish ego and the desire to have social relationships with others, that is constantly in conflict. So in my honours project, I attempted and aimed to construct the Sermon on the Mount as a game, quantified according to ego depletion and pro-social gain. And then these tenets in the Sermon on the Mount were then reviewed, in which 5 tasks were identified and quantified based on ego depletion and pro-social gain. And then the 5 tasks that I identified were trust, generosity, judgment, prayer, and forgiveness. And then I aimed to model the Sermon on the Mount as strategies for being victorious in life, according to 3 strategies: to reward, defect, and to punish the opponent that you play the game against. And then I also calculated the payoffs using game theory and game theoretical approaches. I also simulated different scenarios to see different payoffs between 2 players.
You make it sound so simple, but just even trying to set up a theological concept in mathematical terms. So what I did at the presentation is I did a little bit of an introduction to game theory, about the elements that you might find in a game theoretical model. And what we looked at specifically was that scene from A Beautiful Mind that very generously depicts in a romantic way how John Nash ended up with the Nash equilibrium. Before that, the common knowledge with economics was Adam Smith's theorem, that in order for a community to achieve its highest goal, each individual must solely attempt to get their own individual best gain. And what John Nash found was that if everyone compromises and takes maybe an inferior personal gain, then the global optimum is increased. So perhaps I'll edit in the video clip here just so people have an idea of what I'm talking about.
Incoming, gentlemen. Aye, aye. Deep breaths. Nash, you might want to stop shuffling your papers for 5 seconds.
I will not buy you gentlemen beer.
Oh, we're not here for beer, my friend.
Oh. Does anyone else feel she should be moving in slow motion?
Will she want a large wedding, you think?
Should we say swords, gentlemen? Pistols at dawn?
Have you remembered nothing? Recall the lessons of Adam Smith, the father of modern economics.
In competition, individual ambition serves the common good.
Exactly.
Every man for himself, gentlemen. Yeah, and those who strike out are stuck with their friends.
I'm not gonna strike out.
You can lead a blonde to water, but you can't make her drink.
I don't think you said that.
All right, nobody move. She's looking over here. Right, she's looking at Nash.
Oh, God. All right, he may have the upper hand now, but wait until he opens his mouth. Remember the last time?
Oh, yes, that was one for the history books.
Adam Smith needs revision.
What are you talking about?
If we all go for the blonde, we block each other. Not a single one of us is going to get her. So then we go for her friends. But they will all give us the cold shoulder because nobody likes to be second choice. But what if no one goes for the blonde? We don't get in each other's way, and we don't insult the other girls. That's the only way we win. That's the only way we all get laid. Adam Smith said, the best result comes from everyone in the group doing what's best for himself, right? That's what he said, that's right? Incomplete. Incomplete. Okay? Because the best result would come from everyone in the group doing what's best for himself and the group.
Ash, this is some way for you to get the blonde on your own. You can go to hell.
Governing dynamics, gentlemen. Governing dynamics. Adam Smith. What's wrong?
Yep, here we go.
Careful, careful.
Thank you.
And then from that, then we get the prisoner's dilemma, which is the famous game where two prisoners are caught committing a crime and they're placed in two separate rooms from each other, and they have to decide whether they're going to cooperate or whether they're going to defect on each other. Where cooperating has the greater payout for both, even though defecting has the greater payout for the individual. And when we study the prisoner's dilemma, then we can see that compromising on the big win for yourself so that you can get the smaller win for yourself, but then it is a more stable solution in that both get the smaller win. So we also looked at the prisoner's dilemma a little bit. And then obviously it would have made sense for you to then think of your players in the game of life then as perhaps having these options of whether to pursue the Adam Smith approach to reaching the biggest gain for the individual, or to take the John Nash approach to compromise and see what is the more sustainable game. So that was such an interesting approach that I think we took to try and get the sermon into a game format even. So just remind me again, what were the strategies that you then identified from the sermon that the player could choose to do or not do?
So the player could decide to either reward, defect, or punish their opponent according to the 5 games or the 5 tasks.
And what were those 5 tasks?
Those 5 tasks that I identified from Matthew 5 were trust, generosity, judgment, prayer, and then also forgiveness.
Okay, right, yeah. Yeah, it wasn't easy to quantify that. And then we decided to look at, okay, but what do you gain from the game is you gain relationship, because being trustful and prayerful and generous gains you friendship and relationship and community. But unfortunately, it has an ego depleting effect in that it exhausts the ego to choose to be the less or the least, or so where's that sweet spot between you want to do enough to ensure that you maximize your relationship, but you don't want to do so much that you deplete your ego completely, and that the gain of relationship cannot equate the loss of ego. Why did you choose the topic? How did you even you have a degree in BCom mathematical sciences and you end up studying theology in your fourth year? How?
So actually, like initially I wanted to study theology, and my dad, who is a pastor, was actually the one that told me no, rather not go into that field. And the topic just stood out to me from all the other topics. It was very unique, different, seemed challenging. And never in my wildest dreams could I have imagined that I could attempt such a research topic in the operations research field of study. And because I come from a Christian household, I was immediately drawn to the topic, and it felt like home.
Yeah, you were very brave. When you said let's try it, I felt like I had the project under control with the introduction, because I understood what we wanted to do, and with the literature study even, I was surprised how much literature there was on modelers who are busy modeling the theological games. For example, Brahms with his games in the Hebrew Bible, where he set up the game between God and between Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, to see, what God's options were. Obviously, for him, the best is to not have to set rules and still have obedience. But if his strategy is to set rules or not set rules, and Adam and Eve's strategy are to obey or not to obey, if you then assume God's omniscience, then Brahms showed with his mapping that because he knew that man would fall, really the mathematical optimum is for him to impose rules that optimizes his love for mankind, and then his gain from the matrix. So I was pretty comfortable with the literature, and then as you approached your quantification of the payout matrix, that's when I started to get more and more nervous, because that's groundbreaking work that you've done. I haven't seen quantification like that before, and I feel like that's really the heart of your research. That's the heart of your contribution, is in how well you quantified things like how much ego does forgiveness deplete, and how strongly correlated is the pro-social gain from forgiveness with the ego depletion of praying for someone. That was fantastic work, Esranel. You did such a good job. So I'm so glad that you chose it. I'm so glad that you were brave enough to stick it out with me, even if as mathematicians we wade into this murky area of unquantifiable assumptions. You did really, really well.
Yeah, thank you. It wasn't always that easy.
No, yes, you were brave. At some point I was looking at you just thinking, because you have all of your course load and you're already so exhausted, and you have so many other projects, and then you still come back and you have this amazing write-up on all of the papers that you found that week. I was very proud of you. What then, if you have to explain to someone at the end of your study now, assuming again somebody doesn't maybe have the strongest mathematical background to understand what you did, what were your main results? What were your main findings from your study?
So the results that I came to conclude with in the end showed that, like in a natural setting, it is costly and painful to act according to the Sermon on the Mount and those strategies without a measure of faith. So naturally, the best strategy is to defect and protect yourself and reserve and stand back instead of giving or punishing, because you're in a situation and a scenario where you are uncertain of how your opponent is going to react. So rather than gambling, you'd rather stand back and withdraw yourself from the situation and rather do nothing, which is the easiest and the safest option, I feel like, naturally in any situation. But however, we saw that when simulating the games and with faith, other interesting decisions came to light and were possible and made it worth playing the game of the Sermon on the Mount, where you would earn some reward for rewarding your opponent. So we defined faith as an extra payoff for basically doing the right thing and rewarding your opponent regardless of what their response was to your strategy. And then we saw that when living with faith in a measure of additional payoff, it was possible and rewarding to live according to the Sermon on the Mount, as faith then enabled additional payoff to the player that chose to reward their opponent. So in the end, we concluded that the best strategy for the player was to reward or return to the reward strategy as quickly as possible after deviating from it, since rewarding granted the player the highest expected payoff, and living according to the task that we identified in the Sermon on the Mount, because it does not happen intuitively. We saw that, but with faith, a player can profit and be victorious when following these strategies. And also in scenarios where the opponent mirrors the player's strategy, the best outcome for both players would be to cooperate and reward their opponent.
Yeah, that was, I was glad that we found for two people who play without faith. And what we mean by playing with faith is that there is a hope in some additional metaphysical reward. So something that JB Crone, the director of KRUX, really highlighted at the talk is we must just be careful how we define that reward, in that it can very quickly become a moralistic result where we say, well, you live a life of works for reward, but it is not necessarily a cause and effect reward for being a good person. It's not necessarily the reward of, but it's any metaphysical additional outcome that you can get, whether it is the peace of being in a relationship with God, or whether it is the already not yet kingdom that is already manifest here and you are already drawing from that. So I thought that was such a helpful comment from JB. Especially when if we do write up this project for possible publication, that we must be so careful to not attach that, well, when there is additional payout, some kind of metaphysical payout, we must be so careful to not link that with moralism. It's not a call to moralism, it's a call to, exactly like you stated, a call to faith, in that you need something additional. And what was also so interesting that came out from the conversation when we had this presentation was that just because somebody doesn't have, let's say, faith in the Christian God or faith in the Christian additional reward, it doesn't mean that they're not supplementing their outcome also from another reward. It could be something like it is the reward of pro-sociality minus the cost of ego depletion. But then we saw in order to choose the reward strategy, you need additional payout. Otherwise, you're going to just affect. And we were exploring different kinds of ways that even unbelievers still source that additional payout that's required to do the right thing, except it might come from something like addiction, or it might come from something like self-righteousness. Is all of us do supplement, because all of us are trying to do the right thing. We are trying to live according to the sermon, to be good people. But it's so counterintuitive because it's so expensive to be a good person. And we all supplement. And because the question came up during the conversation is, right, but is it then impossible for an unbeliever to live a righteous life? Like, is it impossible for an unbeliever to live according to the sermon? And that's not what we found. We just found that without additional reward, you wouldn't, because it's too expensive. It's not that you can't, it's just that you wouldn't. So the more interesting question isn't whether or not unbelievers can live moral lives, but it's the interesting question is, what are unbelievers using to supplement that loss of ego to live lives according to the Sermon on the Mount. What is it? Is it addiction? Is it money? Is it self-righteousness? Is it love? Is it what are they supplementing with? Is it charity? In that it removes so much pressure off of the Christian to not have to look around. And then also I think something that was so interesting that we spoke about was the transformation of the game from zero sum to non-zero sum, in that everything that you source from creation is going to be finite, which makes that game zero sum. It means whatever I take for me, I necessarily am taking from someone else, because within the closed system of creation, we are dealing only with finite temporal things. But when we speak about the Christian has the ability to live with faith in an additional reward that is non-zero, because it's pulling from a metaphysical realm that can't run out, and that not necessarily means me taking means you losing. We could both be taking from the same source. So we also spoke a little bit about, okay, if you do need to supplement your payoff in order to live according to the sermon, is it then better to supplement from the finite, which eventually will run out, or is it then better to supplement from the infinite, which could never run out? And that is even if both players, that the one without faith and the one with faith, are supplementing, maybe it's even still a more sustainable game to supplement from the metaphysical infinite. So yeah, we spoke about so many things that I wish we could explore at the conferences that you and I were at, but you know, we were dealing with mathematicians who were just checking your quantification and looking for mistakes in your formulation. So yeah, no, you survived that so well. What was the most difficult part of this research for you?
I think, well, definitely the most difficult part was attempting to quantify these qualitative elements that we identified, and trying to quantify them through literature and finding studies that relate to mine and that could have an input into my studies. And it was also very challenging to find a way to convince the audience or the readers about the quantification method of the different tasks and games, and to have them on board throughout the whole paper and throughout the whole research from beginning to end. I think that was also very challenging.
It was very tricky. I remember with your examiners too for your project, trying to explain to them, because I can compare it to them looking at, yes, but did Esranel bake waffles or did she bake pancakes with the batter? And I'm trying to explain to them the fact that you even had batter, that you had turned mud into batter, and then whatever you do from there, that's irrelevant. The real miracle is the fact that you quantified these. So yeah, no, like if I was your examiner, I would have just you know, top marks. I think you did amazing project. So at the you presented this work also then at the Operations Research Society of South Africa, the conference for the Professional Society for the Operations Researchers. How was this research received? Were you comfortable in presenting it? What do you think the mathematicians thought about this?
So it was very intimidating to present a theological topic in a room of mathematicians. Very intimidating, but to my surprise, the research was received quite well. I was unsure whether the audience was just shocked or surprised by the fact that the research ventures into a religious topic, or by the fact that I attempted such an unusual research topic. And I also expected people to be offended or sensitive about the topic because it is a religious topic, but overall the research was accepted, and you're welcome, to my surprise.
Yeah, I couldn't be at your talk at the conference, and it broke my heart, but I saw the recording afterwards, and the shocked silence when you showed your last slide, and I could see people just trying to digest what just happened and what was she talking about. But I mean, the math was good. You couldn't refute it, and the results were there. and you presented it so professionally, and I think with such sensitivity that you weren't at the conference, to tell a group of unbelievers that they have no hope of living good and righteous lives. You were just trying to explain to them that maybe there's a bigger source for supplemental happiness. And I think you dealt with it so sensitively. So yeah, well done. I do hope when we publish, it's also received with the same thoughtfulness. That's the nature of transdisciplinary research. It's a big buzzword in academia now. Everybody wants to be in transdisciplinary research, but they don't realize that, for example, we're going to have such a tough time, convincing the theological reviewers because of, like I say, comments that even JB helped us with, is how are we defining reward, and are we sure we are using the correct theological terminology to express the correct ideas. So it's all of that subject matter expert, the requirements for that from your application field, and then it's all of the technology, it's all of the technique and the mathematics from the technique that you're applying. So I guess this is my call for a world that works harder at understanding transdisciplinary research and collaborates, harder, so that we can remove these silos, and that we must stop thinking about our subject fields in such tense silos. But yeah, no, well done. we made it, we survived it, and no one was offended or no one was hurt. In retrospect, what about your year or your research would you have done differently? Would you in retrospect still have chosen the topic, or what would you have done differently in the project if you could do it all over again?
Well, in retrospect, I don't know if I would have chosen the topic. It was much more challenging than I could have ever imagined. But I'm glad I did it, and I'm glad that I opened this whole new world, like for myself, that you are able to quantify qualitative elements. I just wish I would have searched longer for a more exact quantification method of the Sermon on the Mount, and to do a more thorough or deeper research into different quantification methods of qualitative aspects, and also to make the game as representative as possible to reality. It would also have been very interesting to set up specialized surveys to capture people's responses to the different scenarios or different games played, to see how real people would have reacted and responded in these situations.
You only had 9 months. I mean, what you've already done in 9 months. So maybe when we start on your PhD, we'll include all of that. Let's go with that. Let's go fix our analysis of the sermon. Yeah, I think in retrospect, maybe I would have also chosen, a simpler text. I think it was bold for us, for me to suggest, let's start with the sermon, maybe something or maybe even just one verse and only look at one game, maybe forgiveness itself. So, but I'm glad we were ambitious, because I feel like it's opened a whole lot of other projects that can flow from this to follow your lead. So what future research do you think could follow from this, now that you're a working lady and I need to still carry on with the students? What else, where do you think I can go with this from here?
I think you can go, like he suggested, that we can find different ways to define this metaphysical reward and look deeper into that. That would also be an interesting topic. To go deeper with my research and quantify it more exact. But I also think further analysis can be done on how to represent other types of games in different situations or scenarios. For example, like a parenthood game between parents and their children, or there could also be research whether both players are aware of the other player's payoff. And how that would affect and influence your strategy and your response to the player's strategy. It would also be interesting to quantify and model a game that would describe different profiles of individuals, for example, in a workplace scenario. And a game of modeling the workplace, for example, like I mentioned, would be informative of the best strategies to adopt in a hierarchical structure in the workplace for employees. And I think it would also be interesting to adopt the game of the Sermon on the Mount to different psychological profiles to see how different people with different mindsets and personalities would play the game.
That sounds so interesting. Yeah, I've been wanting to quantify the Enneagram for a while now, so maybe that's my next move. Let's see what we can do with personality tests. You said your dad is in ministry. How did he receive this research? What did he think we were doing? How did he receive our results? What did he say?
My dad was very confused in the beginning when I explained to him what my research is about. I think he was very uncertain if I was still studying a mathematical degree. He thought I was busy studying psychology or philosophy or something. But he was very amazed by the fact that the operations research field is such a diverse field, and it's not just confined to only solving mathematical problems, but can actually relate to real life problems and scenarios and situations. He was convinced that I was just busy with statistical analysis and coding, and he never imagined that this was actually so true and relevant to real life situations and scenarios.
Yeah, I can imagine when I met him at graduation, I nearly wanted to apologize, like, sir, I'm so sorry for quantifying your theology. I can imagine how profane that must feel to theologians, but I do hope that he picked up, that it was done in a spirit of worship, in understanding and application. And so it was nice meeting him. I'm glad that he didn't think we were completely off of our minds, and that he still supported you in doing this project.
Yeah,
so I think something that's completely different with your project than my other students who are usually just busy with, optimizing profit, and is that it's actually applicable to your own life. So has your research now changed your life in any way, or how you view the world? What lasting changes have these 9 months produced in your life?
So I've been very more aware of my actions and how I react to what other people do towards me, and I would rethink my strategy towards them, or my response to their strategy that they play against me, because it's not just about me or them. There is something bigger than this, bigger than us out there. So it just made me stop and realize that there might be metaphysical reward, not maybe for now, but also for the afterlife or in the future. And that life is not just about living now, and that your actions has a response, and it has effects on other people, and it affects them as well, not just only yourself and your own gain, but it affects other people as well, but also for the afterlife.
Esranel, I'm so proud of you. Thank you for great research. Thank you for an amazing year together. I had so much fun with you. Thank you for your work ethic. You were excellent. So if anybody wants to see where Esranel's work is, it's uploaded on our research site, which is step.org.za. So it's step.org.za. And thank you for KRUX for letting us present our crazy ideas at the community. Thank you for the valuable feedback that we did get from the community. We'll definitely take that into consideration as we work towards publication. For anyone that's interested in these KRUX Thursdays, what's it all about, you can visit us at krux.africa. That's our website. You can go read about what the community does. You can get into contact with me for KRUX events at lishan@krux.africa. So you are welcome to reach out, and then we will invite you to the KRUX Thursdays and to our artist gathering conference. So we hope to meet you there. Thank you so much for your time, Esranel. Thank you for your hard work, and all the best for your future career.
Oh, thank you for having me and conducting this this interview.